The anime begins with a group of Japanese ghosts called yokai. The ghosts gather in a community called the Nura clan. There is a man named Rikuo, a candidate for the third generation of the clan leader. The leader of the clan will be called Sandaime. One day, when Rikuo was about to go to school, he told the clan not to follow him because his friends were looking for Yokai's whereabouts. Not long after, when he was on the way to school, he met a man named Gyuki. Suddenly, the Yokai clan told him that Gyuki wanted to be a Sandaime so he could lead the clan. After that, he met a grandfather named Nurarihyon, the leader of the first generation clan. Gyuki then told Nura how Rikuo looked. He told Nura that Rikuo spoke like humans. He didn't like Rikuo's attitude because the Yokai clan must be respected. Upon arrival at school, a male student named Kyotsugu invites Rikuo and other friends to go on a night trip to the old building in their school, according to rumors that many yokai appeared there. Then a female student named Kana says she doesn't believe in yokai's existence. Her words made Kyotsugu even more eager to prove the existence of yokai. At night, Rikuo asks Nura for permission to go with his friends, but before Rikuo left, Nura discussed with him that he should be the leader of the Nura clan. Rikuo replies that he just wants to be a human and doesn't want to be the leader of the yokai in the Nura clan. Rikuo finally went with his friends to the old building at their school. Kana looks scared, but he says he will protect her. When entering a room, he saw a yokai figure with the body of a girl with an old face, but his friends could not see her whereabouts since they were ghosts. There are many yokai in the building, but Rikuo always gets rid of them so that his friends don't find them. When they entered another room, a yokai figure ran toward them, so they all ran, making Kana faint. He almost changed his form when he faced the yokai. Luckily, a male yokai named Aotabo and a Yuki-onna who we will refer to as Yuki from the Nura clan came to protect their soon-to-be Sandaime, who was none other than Rikuo. Elsewhere, Nura met with the yokai leaders from 26 factions under the auspices of the Nura clan to discuss the change of the clan's new leader. There was little debate among the leaders about Rikuo refusing to be the clan's leader. Even according to a male yokai named Hitotsume, in the last 4 years, Rikuo changed his form into a yokai just once. Meanwhile, at Rikuo's school, Aotabo and Yuki still attack the yokai, who annoys Rikuo. They have cared for him for the past 4 years, but he is unaware of it. It turned out that they had disguised themselves as first graders at his school all this time. They both really want Rikuo to become a Sandaime in the Nura clan, but he still says he just wants to be a human. Suddenly, Kana, who had fainted, finally woke up, so they disappeared. The next day, the Nura clan was visited by a male yokai named Zen. He told Nura that he had come to meet Sandaime. Arriving at Rikuo's house, he immediately went to meet Zen, who was waiting for him. It turns out that Zen has been Rikuo's friend since childhood, and even he has considered Zen as his brother. Zen is angry with Rikuo, who refuses to become a Sandaime. When he is about to attack Rikuo with his strength, he fails because he is sick and has no energy. After that, he leaves the Nura clan. Knowing this, Rikuo was angry with Nura because he told Zen, who was sick, to come there just to persuade him to become a Sandaime. When Zen arrived at his house, he immediately took medicine given by his assistant, a male yokai named Heibitayu. He told Zen not to get too close to the Nura clan so they could stand independently. Zen replied that his clan had been under the Nura clan for generations. Besides that, his weak condition made him need protection from them. Suddenly, Heibitayu attacks Zen. He discovers Heibitayu is from a rebel faction that doesn't agree with Rikuo being Sandaime. Heibitayu also tries to kill him for always supporting Rikuo. Luckily, a male yokai in the form of a crow named Karasu Tengu and Rikuo came there to save him. Heibitayu wanted to kill Rikuo when he saw Rikuo coming there. Unexpectedly, Rikuo can change his form into a yokai and split Heibitayu's body into 2 parts. Zen finally finds out that Rikuo only has a quarter of the yokai blood of the Nura clan, so he can only change his form at night. However, Zen still supports him as a Sandaime for as long as he lives. Even he vows to be loyal to Rikuo. After Zen leaves, Rikuo tells Karasu he wants to become a Sandaime, but Karasu knows he will forget everything when he turns into a human again. The next day, when Rikuo arrives at school, he forgets what happened last night. Then in his class, there is a new female student named Yura. Apparently, she knew a lot of information about yokai, so when Kyotsugu was talking to his friend about yokai, she joined in. She said the most dangerous yokai were animal incarnations. Hearing that, Kyotsugu was amazed at her. Kyotsugu said that he would make a supernatural detective group named Kyojuji that would focus on finding the whereabouts of the yokai. Afterward, he decided that the group's opening would be held at Rikuo's house because, according to rumors, his house was haunted and called Yokai Yashiki. After school, Aotabo and Yuki said to Rikuo that they would help organize the yokai at his home. Unexpectedly, when he arrived at his house, the yokai were having a party celebrating his resurrection. and he managed to change his form into a yokai. It turned out that Karasu had told them about last night's incident. Rikuo, who doesn't remember anything, asked the yokai to tidy up the room because his friends would soon be there. Not long after, his friends arrived at his house and were greeted by his mother, who said it was rare for humans to dare to play in their house. Yura told Rikuo that she wanted to go around because she could feel the air of the yokai in the house. She checked several rooms there. Luckily, the yokai were still able to hide. Until then, Nura appeared in front of them, and Yura immediately glared at him. After Nura left, she suspected him as yokai, but she couldn't detect it because a high-level yokai could hide their aura. Soon after, there is a rat that scares his friends. Then Yura chases it because she suspects that the rat is a yokai. Suddenly, the rat turned big, and she attacked it with a shikigami technique that could annihilate the yokai. Shikigami is the spirits of humans or animals who died carrying feelings of revenge and hatred. Yura is a descendant of a family of yokai exterminators called Onmyoji from a famous family. She moved to the city because, according to rumors, there were many supernatural activities. Even she heard the news that the yokai leader was there. After Rikuo's friends return home, Yuki and Aotabo tell him that the rat was not a yokai from their clan. Meanwhile, a group of men confronted Yura and Kana, who were walking home. But she learns that they are not humans. They are rat yokai. They find out that Yura and Kana are Rikuo's friends. That's why the rat yokai followed them. Yura immediately attacked them and turned her shikigami into Tanro, who could kill several yokai. However, the leader of a male yokai, a man named Kuso, takes Kana hostage, and Yura is forced to stop the fight. After that, Kuso slapped her in the face, making her fall. On the other hand, the Kuso clan is chasing some cat yokai from the Bakaneko clan. They managed to kill 2 members of the cat yokai. Fortunately, the leader of the cat clan, Ryota, was able to escape. Rikuo, who was in his yard, was visited by a rat yokai. The rat said he was a servant who ran away from the Kuso clan to tell him they had kidnapped Yura and Kana. But the rat advised him not to bring bodyguards because if Yura, who was an Onmyoji, saw it, it would be dangerous for them. The rat brought Rikuo to the front of a house. When he got there, he was caught by several rats and brought him in front of Kuso. Soon after, Kuso showed his 2 friends who were being locked up to him and told him that if he wanted his friend to be free, he must step down from Sandaime's position and announce it to the whole country tonight. As Rikuo was walking home, he accidentally met Ryota. Their clan was ordered by Nura to eradicate the Kuso clan, but instead, they were defeated by the Kuso clan. Hearing that, he brought him to his house. Arriving home, Rikuo told Karasu to announce his written resignation letter to the clans throughout the country. Then Nura said that the Kuso clan might have a grudge because they had been removed from the Nura clan faction. Nura left this matter to Rikuo as his successor, but Rikuo still said he would resign for the sake of his friends. Ryota tells Rikuo that the Kuso clan never keeps their promise. Afterward, he went to Nura to apologize for his failure and promised to fix it soon. He was injured and couldn't even walk, so he fell while leaving Rikuo's house. Seeing Ryota's persistence, Rikuo finally changed his form into a yokai. He then brought the members of the Nura clan to attack the rat's base. Arriving at the rat's base, Aotabo immediately freed Yura and Kana from custody. Suddenly, a war between the Nura clan against the Kuso clan happened. After they managed to defeat the Kuso clan, Ryota asked Rikuo's permission to fight against Kuso. But he, who had been seriously injured, was finally overthrown. After seeing the incident, Rikuo immediately burned Kuso to death without touching him. The next day at school, Yura apologizes to Kana for involving her with the yokai. She replied that it was not a problem because she was unafraid when she saw the yokai who had helped them. Then Kyotsugu called his friends who wanted to join to convey information about their association. But Rikuo was not present at that time. It turned out that he didn't go to school that day because he was sick. Zen came to the Nura clan to visit him. He asked if Rikuo couldn't remember anything when he turned into a yokai, but he instead didn't answer. On the house's terrace, Nura is talking to 2 yokai. He suspects that the Kuso clan is ruled by someone who doesn't want Rikuo to become a Sandaime. At the same time, Rikuo's friends came to see him. Kyotsugu conveyed the news that this weekend they would meet a male yokai expert named Professor Ada Shibara. Ada Shibara even had prepared a room for them to stay in and wanted to train them on yokai. It turns out that Hitotsume overheard Rikuo and his friends talking. Meanwhile, Nura told Karasu to investigate who the traitor in the Nura clan was related to the Kuso clan. Long story short, the weekend arrived. Rikuo and his friends went to a village called Umerakuen to meet Ada Shibara at the Umewakamaru temple. They went up the mountain to find a small temple, but Rikuo, Yuki, and Yura felt odd. Suddenly, a strange man appeared in front of them. It turned out to be Ada Shibara. Rikuo asked Ada Shibara who he worshipped in that small temple. He replied that the small temple was made to honor the good yokai Umewakamaru. They continued their journey again. When they arrived at the top, Adashibara said that Umewakamaru lived on the mountain. Meanwhile, at Rikuo's house, Karasu is surprised to learn that Sandaime went to Umerakuen. Adashibara explained that the mountain was where Gyuki lived, knowing that Yuki was afraid that he would attack them. At the same time, Rikuo also couldn't protect them because he couldn't change his form into yokai during the day. Plus, Yuki couldn't possibly show her strength in front of Rikuo's friends. Knowing the danger in the mountain, Rikuo took them all home. However, Kyotsugu, who did not know the danger, refused it. After all, Adashibara had prepared a place for them to stay. He convinced them to keep going to the inn because the house was already installed with anti-yokai powers. He said Gyuki's existence on the mountain was just a legend. Without them knowing that Adashibara was controlled by yokai using threads, he was controlled to leave them. When the thread was removed, his consciousness returned, and he was confused about why he was on the mountain. Meanwhile, Rikuo and his friends arrived at the inn, which looked strange, but he didn't tell his friends. Then Kyotsugu invites a male friend named Shima to look for yokai. Even though they were banned by Rikuo, they didn't care, so Rikuo and Yuki came with them to take care of them. On the other hand, the women were soaking in the inn's hot springs. Out of nowhere, Kana was suspicious when Yuki didn't come to the bathhouse and thought she was alone with Rikuo. The jealous Kana immediately left her friend at the hot spring to look for him. Soon after, the yokai came and wanted to prey on the women that were in the bathhouse. Turned out that the one who had been playing with the thread was the leader of the yokai. Luckily, Nura came to that place and defeated them. Meanwhile, Rikuo and his friends walking around were watched by the yokai, who were Gyuki's subordinates. They arrive at a cave that, according to legend, is the den of the yokai. While the four of them were walking, suddenly, a yokai started chanting a spell to make Kyotsugu and Shima feel like separating from Rikuo and Yuki. Rikuo, who felt there was something wrong with them, immediately chased after them. Meanwhile, Yuki, who was alone, was attacked by a male yokai but managed to avoid it. She said the Nura clan would forgive him if he stopped attacking them, but he instead stabbed her leg. After that, the yokai was about to slash her, but she covered his sword with ice so that she wasn't directly hit by his slash. Luckily, when the yokai was about to kill her, Rikuo could save her in time. While in the hot spring, Nura fights the yokai while protecting her two friends. Then she was dropped from the tree by force. It turned out that the power came from Karasu's children, who were the main supervisors of the Nura clan. Then they took the yokai away from there. Aotabo also apparently came there to protect them. He managed to bring Shima and Kyotsugu back to the inn. Meanwhile, in the middle of the forest, Rikuo fights with Gyuki's men without turning himself into a yokai, and he managed to knock his opponent down. Afterward, Gyuki's men used a spell to remove a sharp object from his body that almost killed Sandaime. Soon after, Rikuo changed his form into a yokai so he could kill his enemy easily. Meanwhile, in the Nura clan, Zen is seen meeting Nura because he suspects that Gyuki has betrayed him. Nura already knew, so he let Rikuo go there to test the loyalty of Gyuki, one of their clan's top executives. While Kana was still looking for Yuki's whereabouts, Rikuo accidentally saw the yokai form of Sandaime carrying her. Then he left Yuki to Kana, then he left. He went to look for Gyuki's whereabouts to ask why Gyuki wanted to kill him. When Rikuo met Gyuki, he immediately pointed his sword at Rikuo's neck. He counterattacked Gyuki, saying that he would lead the Nura clan. Rikuo asked again what Gyuki would do if he succeeded in killing him. Then Gyuki replied that he would kill himself. He says there used to be a husband and wife, where the husband was a great general. Even though the couple already has everything, they both have no children. Until one night, a luminous object was seen that entered their house and then entered the wife's body. Miraculously, after the events of that night, the general's wife became pregnant. Long story short, they finally had a baby boy named Umewakamaru. When he was 7 years old, his father died in a battle. Then his mother sent him to a temple to practice there. Time continued to pass until he was 12 years old. Although relatively young, he had already served as a respected head monk. One day Umewakamaru was shocked when he heard the news that his mother was sick. He immediately returned to his house to meet his mother. Because the journey was very far, he rested and fell asleep until he was awakened by two women. They say they used to work for his family and tell him that his mother is currently moving to Mount Nejirime. Unsuspectingly, Umewakamaru followed the two women. It turns out that they trapped him to be used as bait for the yokai ruler of the mountain named Gyuki. Umewakamaru, who was just an ordinary human, couldn't fight him, who changed his form into a giant. When he was on the cliff's edge, Gyuki showed that his mother had fallen prey. Umewakamaru, who felt he had lost everything, finally jumped into his mouth. Then Gyuki felt something strange in his body, so he fell from the top of the cliff. Since then, Umewakamaru came out of Gyuki's body and told the two women that from now on, he would become a yokai even though he cursed the god and the world that had taken his parents. Wakamaru also killed the 2 women who had trapped him. With a burning grudge, he begins to kill humans and yokai he meets. He is known as the Lord of Mount Nurarihyon and is known as Gyuki. Because of his cruelty, the Nura clan finally went to Mount Nurarihyon, led by Nura, who was still young at that time, until there was a big battle between the Nura clan against the Gyuki clan for 3 days and 3 nights. Gyuki was finally defeated by Nura, but he didn't kill Gyuki because Nura admired his strength. After that, Nura invited him to join the Nura clan and swore to be loyal to the Nura clan. The scene returns to the present. Gyuki tells Rikuo the reason for his betrayal. He wants Rikuo to throw away his human nature and become a complete sandaime of the yokai. Suddenly, he puts Gyuki down, saying that he would indeed become a sandaime, then stabs Gyuki. Gyuki said that he loves the Nura clan and doesn't want it to be destroyed if Rikuo leads them. Soon after, Karasu's children get angry at Gyuki for daring to attack sandaime. Gyuki called Rikuo a fool for not wanting to admit as a yokai. Even so, he acknowledged Rikuo's formidable strength in overcoming him. Because of that, he prepared to kill himself. Luckily, Rikuo could stop him and tell him to not die because he would regret his actions later. Rikuo said if Gyuki wants to ask about humans, then ask when he is in human form. The next day, Gyuki woke up and was already in the Nura clan. Afterward, Rikuo comes in human form and says that Gyuki is his family. The scene moves to a supernatural gathering, and Kyotsugu invites his friends to look for yokai again. On the other hand, in the Nura clan, a meeting of the higher-ups will be held to determine Gyuki's fate, who has betrayed them. The meeting began, and Nura officially announced that Rikuo was a sandaime candidate, so he handed over the case to Rikuo. Rikuo also said in front of the higher-ups that it was true that Gyuki had committed disloyalty, and even he pressured Kuso to force Rikuo to withdraw from sandaime. But Gyuki did it for the good of the Nura clan, so Rikuo declared him innocent. One of the higher-ups objected to Rikuo's decision, but he replied that they still needed Gyuki as the clan's guardian of the western region, because only he could do that task. Then Nura closed the meeting by saying that Rikuo was the only sandaime candidate for now. If no candidate is selected at the age of 13 years old, Rikuo will officially lead the Nura clan. The next day, Nura talked with one of the top male members, Hihi. He said a group of yokai was causing trouble in the Bakaneko area. Nura heard that Hihi intended to investigate even though he initially did not allow him, but Hihi insisted on investigating the case. In the evening, Hihi and his members died in a bamboo forest, and Ryota told the beginning of the chaos in their area. It started when a male member was hit by a gust of wind that caused his clothes to tear, and not long after, he died. Hearing this, Rikuo felt sad because when he had just officially become a candidate, suddenly, one of the higher-ups died. Then Karasu's children came to see him, telling him that Karasu wanted to meet him. It turns out that he intends to increase the number of Rikuo's bodyguards because there are yokai who are targeting their clan. The next day, Rikuo was escorted by 4 additional yokai. The other higher-ups were also given a bodyguard to guard them. Meanwhile, Nura refuses to be escorted and wants to go for a walk with a yokai named Nato. While walking around, Nura accidentally met Yura. He invites Yura to talk in the garden while eating bread. She said that her purpose in coming was to defeat the yokai leader named Nura, without her knowing that the person beside her was the one she was looking for. Yura daydreamed, saying that she considered yokai her enemy all this time, but she was confused because somehow she was always saved by the yokai. Afterward, she asked whether yokai was actually evil or not. Nura instead replies that yokai are evil and she must fight them. Suddenly there was a strong wind that blew. He knew the wind was coming from the roof of the tall building in front of them. Then suddenly, there was an attack. Luckily, Yura found out, and she protected him. The 5 Kametachi wind controllers appeared. Yura tries to protect Nura from them. She even made a deer named Rakusan to take him away from that place. Seeing her surrounded by 5 Kametachi people at once, he intended to help her. However, she was able to defeat them all. At school, Rikuo looked out the window and saw that Karasu was looking for Nura. Gyuki's men, Gozumezu, said that Karasu was looking for Nura's whereabouts, who fled because he refused to be escorted. While in the park, Yura looks arrogant because she managed to kill 4 Kametachi people. Suddenly there is a wind attack from the leader of Kametachi, which makes Yura's Shikigami fall one by one. After knowing that Nura was not there, he just left because his goal was to attack Nura. The Kametachi leader then met Nura on the roof of the building, but his strength is not comparable to Nura, who is angry because of Hihi's death. Nura made him unable to move and could not see, killing the leader. The scene shifts to Rikuo and his friends, who are visited by 2 strange students, Tamazuki and Inogami. Tamazuki said that he had the same ability as Rikuo. He also said that he would take the territory of the Nura clan. The way he talked was like challenging Rikuo. After saying that, Tamazuki and Inogami just left, and strangely enough, 5 other people followed them. People called them the 7 Pilgrims. In the afternoon, Karasu was still looking for Nura, who had not yet returned home. The members say that Nura's disappearance is an opportunity for them to destroy the Nura clan, even though they still have great yokai. The 7 Pilgrims said they would eliminate the yokai of the Nura clan, and it was an easy thing for them. Shortly afterward, a group of 7 pilgrims rioted in the city to get the attention of the yokai of the Nura clan. Their plan was successful because the yokai in the Nura clan quickly received news of the riot. It scared the weak yokai, but Yuki tried to calm them down by saying that even though Nura was not around, they still had Sandaime or Rikuo. The next day, Rikuo left for school with only Yuki and Aotabo because the other yokai were ordered to guard the city. In the afternoon, a chicken yokai, who is a member of the 7 pilgrims, burns trees in the park. Coincidentally, Kana and Yura passed by the park at that time, so they managed to extinguish the fire with Yura's shikigami. However, Yura was attacked by the chicken yokai. Fortunately, Karasu's children were on guard there, so they immediately chased after the yokai. When Yura got home, she immediately called Rikuo to tell him what had happened at the park earlier and asked him to be careful. He became restless and said to Gyuki that he would not let his friend be hurt. Tamazuki told his members that the show was about to start, and the Nura clan was on stage. Meanwhile, in the Nura clan, Inogami is stalking them from the top of the tree. At that time, the Nura clan had a yokai man named Shoei, who met the higher-ups of the Nura clan and said that he would take revenge for his father's death. Not long after, Rikuo came to their room to decide what steps they would take. He warns them to unite and not to act separately, especially for Shoei, who wants revenge. Because Nura is not around, Rikuo will temporarily take over. Shoei also said he would follow his orders and the other higher-ups except for Hitotsume. Meanwhile, in front of Rikuo's house, Inogami started his action by killing one of the weak yokai. The incident made Hitotsume hysterical himself until Inogami accidentally passed them all into the Nura clan and ransacked the contents of the house. Rikuo, Yuki, and Aotabo chased Inogami to the front of the gate. It turned out that Tamazuki and his members had been waiting for the presence of the Nura clan. Afterward, Tamazuki said he was the leader of the 88 yokai Shikoku gods and allowed the Nura clan to become his followers. Soon after, Shoei, filled with revenge, immediately showed himself, followed by Gozumezu and Yuki, who also opened the fight. The chicken yokai immediately fired at them, burning the Nura clan's house. Then they left the Nura clan. It turned out that they came only to introduce themselves. Meanwhile, the Nura clan was busy putting out the fire. The next day at school, Rikuo asks his friends to come to his house with the excuse that they will be holding a training camp. His goal is to keep his friends safe from the pursuit of Tamazuki and his members. Everyone agreed except for Yura, who couldn't come because she wanted to investigate something. In the mountains of Shikoku, Nurarihyon and Nado were seen there, but he feels the place is now very different from the last time he was there. Gozumezu is looking for the whereabouts of the members of the 7 pilgrims because last night, Gozu managed to signal one of their yokai members. Meanwhile, Rikuo's friends arrived at his house and were immediately greeted by his mother. Yura was in a place with a small temple where someone had tampered with the statues of gods. It looks like Gozumezu has managed to catch their target in a warehouse. But the yokai looked weak, so they asked why the weak yokai seemed to be able to join the 7 pilgrim members. Meanwhile, in the meeting room of the Nura clan, Hitotsume made a fuss again because Rikuo asked them to stay in the room for a while. He was doing it for their safety. However, one of the higher-ups named Daruma said that without Nura's presence, they had to obey orders from Sandaime. Meanwhile, Gozumezu was still in a warehouse and interrogated the yokai until it started raining. Along with the rain, the yokai named Gongi Kozo also released his water power, so Gozumezu fled and returned to the Nura clan to look for Kappa, who had water power too. However, Gozumezu was late because Kappa already knew about his presence, and even Gozumezu wanted to meet Rikuo. Then suddenly, Rikuo and Kappa appeared in front of him. Kappa learns that Gongi Kozo wants to destroy the water purification plant and create chaos in the city. The 2 yokai water controllers clashed with strength. Yura, who was not far from that place, approached them. Kappa turns out to have a stronger power than Gongi Kozo. Then the chicken yokai came there to take Gongi Kozo away. As Tamazuki and his members became increasingly active, the Nura clan tightened their guard in the city even more. Aotabo stops by Ryota's bookstore to see a female yokai who has just worked there, without them knowing that she is a member of the 7 pilgrims. Afterward, there was a commotion outside saying that one of the higher-ups of the Nura clan had been attacked in the forest. The next day, Rikuo received news from Karasu's daughter, who came to the Nura clan, that the leader named Obake and 3 of his members had been attacked by the enemy. Hitotsume made another commotion during the meeting of the higher-ups of the Nura clan, but he was frightened after Gyuki glared at him. Karasu's children continue to report that Obake was attacked while he was leaving the Nura clan. They thought there was one traitor in the room that gave information to the enemy. Nura was walking alone in the middle of the city while investigating what was really going on in the city. She then accidentally met a female yokai and immediately attacked her, but the yokai fled away because she didn't want to attract the attention of the Nura clan. Nura continued to search for the woman's whereabouts by detecting the presence of yokai, but instead, she arrived at Rikuo's house. His friends practicing in his yard saw her presence and greeted her. Nura decided to meet Rikuo and told him that she was chasing a female yokai but instead arrived in front of his house. She said that the female yokai appeared from an alley at the back of the city. Hearing that information, Rikuo told Karasu to do an investigation. After telling him, she said goodbye, and Rikuo ordered a bodyguard for her. In the afternoon, Karasu received information about the female yokai that Nura was referring to. It turns out that the female yokai is currently working at Ryota's bookstore, and she often meets the higher-ups of the Nura clan. Hearing this information, Rikuo changed his form into a yokai to start moving. It turns out that the person who often leaks information to the female yokai is Hitotsume, who often gets drunk at Ryota's shop. Hitotsume did not know that the woman was one of the members of the 7 pilgrims, so he told her information about his family. Afterward, the woman felt a terrible air directed at her, so she ran away from the tavern. It turned out that the aura came from Rikuo, who was looking for her. After that, he brought Hitotsume to the Nura clan. Arriving at the Nura clan, the other higher-ups blamed Hitotsume for leaking information when he was drunk, but he instead blamed Rikuo for not being able to unite them all. Meanwhile, Nura, walking alone in the middle of the city, was followed by the female yokai. She who realized it ran to a quiet place. The bodyguard assigned by Rikuo to guard her instead loses her track. When she wanted to attack female yokai, she suddenly tied Nura's body with her hair. Luckily, the bodyguard was able to find Nura when she was almost killed. The 2 yokai had power in their hair and were ready to fight, but they were frightened by the air they felt. It turns out that Rikuo and Karasu's children came to that place too. Rikuo, who only showed his shadow, cut a female yokai's hair. He said he would not kill them. He instead left a message for them to tell Tamazuki not to use women to do his dirty work. After everything was done, Rikuo kept waiting for Nura until she came to her senses. She was even more confused because she was always helped by the yokai. The next day, Rikuo thought about what Tamazuki's real goal was because if they wanted the power of the Nura clan, they would attack massively. But now they are attacking in stealth. He guessed the yokai Shikoku had other goals. Soon after, Kyotsugu called his friends to gather and see a map of their city. He had put an X on the part of the temple that had been destroyed by yokai Shikoku. Afterward, he said they should investigate as a yokai search team and leave the Nura clan, so Rikuo and his bodyguards came with them to protect him. They arrived at a temple that had just been destroyed last night without realizing that Nura was also investigating that place. Nura, who saw Rikuo and Yuki, who looked familiar, even misunderstood and thought they were dating. Because Nura knew Kana liked Rikuo, she came out of hiding and advised him not to play with women's hearts. After Nura left, he found a torn kimono shirt and gave it to Kyotsugu. Arriving at the Nura clan, Rikuo is still thinking about what yokai Shikoku's real goal is. Shortly afterward, he told his female bodyguard, Keijuro, that he already knew everything. So, he told his members to scatter in the city to protect all the temples that had not been destroyed because yokai Shikoku's goal was to destroy all Tachigami or temple guardian gods to make the foundation of the Nura clan collapse. Aotabo and Karasu's children guarding together were surprised by the presence of Kyotsugu and Shima in front of the temple. Because Kyotsugu can read the vortex pattern of the temple that has been destroyed and leads to the temple, which will be the next target. Aotabo also reported this to Rikuo, then he went there. At the temple, Kyotsugu and Shima did not realize that one of the yokai named Sodemogi, the cursed yokai, had appeared behind him. Sodemogi thought that Kyotsugu was the Tachigami of the temple. Then, Sodemogi pulled his clothes. Turned out that the yokai has a curse. If the person being pulled by his clothes then turns his head, that person will be cursed. Just as Kyotsugu was about to turn his head, Shima used his ball to attack the cursed yokai. Sodemogi accidentally flashed in front of Rikuo and Yuki, but as the two chases after him, they are accosted by 2 other yokai Shikoku. At that time, Aotabo and Karasu's children protected Rikuo. Aotabo immediately collided with an ogre yokai while Karasu's children fought the fire chicken yokai. The fire chicken yokai shows its great firepower, but Karasu's children can create a whirlwind that makes the fire turn towards its master, making him destroyed instantly. Seeing the fire chicken yokai lose, the ogre immediately fled from there. The next day the yokai search team accidentally found a small hidden temple even though Yuki didn't know the existence of the temple. Arriving at the Nura clan, Rikuo tells Yuki that the Nura clan borrowed the Tachigami powers long ago, so they must protect all the temples. They both ask Karasu about the owner of the temple they just found. He replied that the temple seemed to belong to a Tachigami named Senba who could cure diseases. Unexpectedly, one of Rikuo's female friends named Tori returned to the temple alone, carrying a lot of shikigami, and it turns out that she used to pray there often. While praying, Sodemogi or the cursed yokai grabbed Tori's clothes and managed to make her turn around, making her unable to move. Luckily, one of the male yokai named Kuratabo from the Nura clan came to help Tori. It turned out that he was late because she was cursed. Then, they took Tori to the hospital with her friends. Not long after, Rikuo decides to return to Senba Temple and meet Kuratabo to take him to find Sodemogi and ask how to recover Tori. Unexpectedly, Senba appeared at the small temple. Kuratabo immediately asked for help to heal Tori. Afterward, Senba replied that his current strength was not enough to dispel such a powerful curse. Rikuo says they have to defeat Sodemogi. After that, Rikuo transforms into a yokai and summons Karasu's children to look for Sodemogi's whereabouts. Karasu's children mobilized many crows to look for him, and Ryota also helped. Shortly after, Karasu's children reported that he had managed to find Sodemogi. At that time, Sodemogi was planning to destroy a temple again. He also wanted to kill the temple's Tachigami. But suddenly, he was attacked by Kuratabo and then disappeared. The next scene is when little Tori comes to the Senba temple to thank him for healing her. Since then, she diligently came there to clean the temple. It means that Senba gets strength from people who pray in his temple because, nowadays, he has been forgotten, so he has no power anymore, and even he can be destroyed. Then the group of supernatural detectives came to Senba temple carrying origami and prayed there for Tori's recovery. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Tori's condition is critical. But Senba met her because his strength had returned thanks to the prayers of Tori's friends at his temple so that he could heal her. On the other hand, Nura is going to Shikoku to meet a mountain leader, Tanaki, the father of Tamazuki, who is currently targeting the Nura clan. Tanaki says maybe Tamazuki is currently following in his footsteps as a young man who once led the yokai. He also told Nura to be careful with one of the members of the 7 pilgrims named Inogami because he was very dangerous. The next day, Inogami is on top of the building and wants to kill Rikuo even when Tamazuki forbids him. Being hard-headed, Inogami chooses to go alone. Meanwhile, in the Nura clan, Kyotsugu gets comments from someone through the yokai site he created. The person informed that if they turned on the projector in their school's auditorium, yokai would appear on the screen. The excited Kyotsugu immediately invited his friends to go there tonight. But Rikuo stopped them. He was afraid that his friends being attacked by Tamazuki's group. After that, Kenjiro gave the news that there was a call for Rikuo. It turned out that the call was from Inogami, who was already in an old building that Kyotsugu was currently going to. Inogami admitted that he had written a comment on the Kyotsugu website to come there. Hearing this, Rikuo looked for his friends, but they had all gone to the old building without knowing that Inogami was waiting for them with the wild yokai. Arriving at the auditorium, Kyotsugu invites Shima to find a projector that can release yokai. Afterward, Rikuo followed them and met his female friends. Not far from where he was, there was Inogami, who was stalking them. Inogami feels angry at him for being friends with humans. It turns out that Rikuo didn't come alone. He came with Aotabo and Kenjiro, who were killing the wild yokai. Since it was hazardous there, Rikuo asked them to leave the place. Meanwhile, Kyotsugu and Shima managed to find the projector. Soon after, the two of them turned on the projector. Then Inogami's image appeared on the screen. After that, Inogami asks Rikuo why he is friends with humans who always despise and hate the yokai. It turns out that Inogami has a personal grudge against humans who always call him a monster. But when he was about to attack Rikuo, Rikuo's bodyguards came there to help him and held Inogami. Because of this, he hates Rikuo even more than telling him that he is a spoiled child and is always protected by other yokai. Inogami, filled with hatred, can release his strength so that the grip is released. He also changed his form into a yokai and tried to attack Rikuo. However, Inogami was stopped by a male yokai named Kubinashi, who had the power of thread. When Inogami is bound, he tells Rikuo that Tamazaki will rule because he is a yokai who can control humans, unlike Rikuo, who made humans his friends. Tamazaki said that the yokai's level was above humans. That's why they shouldn't be friends with humans. Inogami also said that it's only Tamazaki who accepts his existence. When Inogami feels very angry, he turns into a giant monster so that he can untie Kubinashi's bond. Inogami became a giant and began to blow Rikuo's bodyguards easily until he faced off alone with Rikuo. Luckily it was night, so Rikuo could change his form into a yokai. Rikuo immediately slashed Inogami's body, but when he realized Rikuo's power was now above him, he immediately ran away. He kept chasing Inogami until they arrived at the main building of his school. He managed to take down Inogami with just one slash, then Tamazaki appeared beside Inogami. However, Tamazaki's arrival was only to take Inogami away with him. Tamazaki said their final battle would happen soon and promised not to hurt Rikuo's friends and the residents. The next day at school, Rikuo lets all of his friends go home. Meanwhile, Kyotsugu was disappointed because he could not see Youkai and asked for another training camp to be held at Rikuo's house, but only Shima agreed to the idea. On the other hand, on Mount Shikoku, the king of Tanaki tells Nura that Tamazaki once found a legendary treasure that made his form change. At that time, suddenly, Tamazaki summoned 88 Yokai Shikoku to fight against the Nura clan. It turns out that the treasure found by him is a sword named Hasan Okashi, which is called the Demon King's Hammer. Not long after, Shoei came to the old building alone to avenge his father. But when he just arrived inside the building, a giant ogre stepped on him. Luckily, Karasu's 3 children came there to help him and took him away from there. Knowing the news, Rikuo blamed himself for not daring to take action against Yokai Shikoku. Shortly afterward, Zen said they should start fighting by bringing troops from the Nura clan that's called Hyaki Yako. The senior officials, including Karasu, said they were the Hyaki who belonged to Nura and had sworn to be loyal to him. Rikuo also had to make his own troops or Hyaki Yako. Hearing that, he doubted whether anyone would want to be his follower while he could only become a yokai at night. His doubts made Zen angry. He said that soon Rikuo would have troops that would accept him as he is and be loyal to him like Zen. Not long after, Zen told Yuki and the others that Rikuo would make Hyaki Yako. Hearing that, they finally toasted and swore to be loyal to Rikuo. When Rikuo is alone in his yard, he sees a seriously injured Shoei waking up from his sleep to take revenge. Shortly after, he said that if Shoei wanted to attack Yokai Shikoku, Rikuo would go with him because Shoei was his family. The next day Nura, Nato, and the king of Tanaki were riding a train. On the way, the king of Tanaki said that 300 years ago, Tanaki had fought against humans because of territorial disputes. The yokai were able to win because of their strength, but in the end, the yokai were massacred because there was a human who used the Demon King's hammer sword, who was currently in Tamazaki's hands. Meanwhile, the higher-ups gathered in the meeting room of the Nura clan because there was news that there would be a big war against Yokai Shikoku soon. They feel worried without the presence of Nura beside them. After that, Zen said they should entrust everything to Sandaime. Hitotsume replied that they had to test Rikuo's sincerity first. Zen didn't hesitate to test it and asked Yokai to summon Rikuo. At that time, Rikuo was sitting in front of the main gate of the Nura clan while waiting for the arrival of Yokai Shikoku. Then his men accompanied Rikuo there, and the higher-ups saw his sincerity. But Hitotsume said there was no way a comedian like him could save them. On the other hand, Tamazaki and the Yokai Shikoku have moved to attack the Nura clan. Besides that, Rikuo and his Hyaki Yako are about to face Yokai Shikoku. Hitotsume comes and blocks them, saying Rikuo can't move without the higher-ups' approval. Then Gyuki said that the higher-ups couldn't stop Rikuo because he was moving with his own Hyaki Yako. Hitotsume said that if Rikuo fought them with only his Hyaki Yako, he would not be able to win. Then Karasu's children came and delivered the news that Yokai Shikoku, with many troops, had gathered. Afterward, the Nura clan finally left for the battleground. Gozumezu, who supported the Nura clan troops, said they would join the battle when their business was done. It turned out that Gozumezu disguised himself and went to enemy territory to distribute drinks. There they get information that Tamazaki has a Demon King hammer sword. However, as they were about to report this to Rikuo, Tamazaki noticed their disguise. Gozumezu was immediately attacked by Tamazaki. Not long after, the two clans finally met in the middle of the city. Tamazaki changed his form into a yokai. Unexpectedly, Rikuo advanced alone towards Yokai Shikoku, so the Yokai Shikoku surrounded him, including Inogami, who was very grudging against Rikuo. After that, Rikuo's Hyaki Yako troops attacked them until the fight began. They faced their respective enemies while Rikuo faced off against Tamazaki. Inogami tries interrupting Rikuo and Tamazaki's fight, but Kubinashi manages to tie him with his threads. While the yokai search team was looking at their website, Kyosugu got a lot of news through his website, which informed that many yokai appeared in their city. Then, Kyosugu invites all his friends to go there. Meanwhile, on the battlefield, Rikuo managed to corner Tamazaki. 3 Yokai Shikoku came and surrounded Rikuo, making him weak and being attacked by one of the female members of the 7 pilgrims named Yosuzume, which blinded his eyes. He immediately surrounded himself with blue flames so that any yokai approached him would be burned, but Tamazaki could pierce the blue flames and stab him in the back. Luckily, when Rikuo was about to be killed by Tamazaki, Yuki came and helped him. Yosuzume then came and attacked her with a blind technique. Yosuzume made all the yokai there, including Yokai Shikoku, blind. On the other hand, Kurotabu and Shoei, fighting far away, were not affected by that blind technique. Afterward, they accidentally saw Gozumezu, unconscious due to Tamazaki's attack earlier. Just as Yosuzume thought Yuki had given up, she tried to make Yuki blind. However, she was being tricked because Yuki had covered one of her eyes with ice so she could still see. Finally, Yuki managed to defeat her so all yokai could see again. When Zen was treating the wounds of the yokai on the battlefield, Shoei came to him and asked him to treat Gozumezu. At the same time, Ogre can throw Aotabo's body. Ogre declares that he is the yokai with the strongest physique in all of Japan. When Aotabo released his ceiling skull necklace, it turned out that he had great strength and managed to defeat the ogre with just one hit. Meanwhile, Kappa can defeat his enemy with the power of very strong water. Nevertheless, Rikuo and Tamazaki are still fighting. Tamazaki shows the power of his sword, which can be stronger when used to kill yokai. So, Tamazaki killed his troops cruelly, making the sword change shape. Even he killed a female yokai to increase the power of his sword. Yura, who can feel the air of yokai, she comes to the yokai battlefield. Then she directly confronted Tamazaki. She immediately attacked him with her shikigami, but her strength was no match for the Demon King's hammer sword. Seeing Yura in danger, Rikuo attacked Tamazaki until he managed to destroy his mask. While Inogami saw the presence of Kana alone, he took her as a hostage. After that, Inogami told Tamazaki to kill her, but unexpectedly Tamazaki killed him to perfect the power of his sword. The final battle begins, but Rikuo takes Tamazaki to fight elsewhere. Soon after, Hyakki troops followed Rikuo away, so that Kyotsugu, who came late, couldn't even see the yokai. Arriving at that place, Rikuo and Tamazaki clashed and looked still even. But soon, the sun will rise, and Hyakki troops are worried because Rikuo's power will soon disappear. Afterward, in Rikuo's subconscious, he saw two people say to him that, "Day or night, you and I are one." They told him that he could still be a yokai even though the sun had risen. After knowing that, Rikuo imitates Nura's movement, which can trick his opponent like a shadow so that Tamazaki cannot slash him. After that, Rikuo appeared behind Tamazaki and slashed him so that the yokai he absorbed earlier could be freed, and then, Rikuo cut his mask again. When he was about to kill Tamazaki, suddenly Nura came and blocked him. Tamazaki turned out want to surpass his father. That's why he wanted to kill him. However, Rikuo managed to prevent it and then told him to take care of Yokai, who sincerely loves him. King Tanaki also apologized for all of Tamazaki's actions because he was his favorite son. Not long after, it looks like Tamazaki has come to his senses and has turned good. Suddenly, he is approached by a white puppy. He believes that the dog is the reincarnation of Inogami. While in the meeting room of the Nura clan, Rikuo and Nura thanked all the yokai who had helped him fight Yokai Shikoku, and they all celebrated by having a party. The season 2 begins by showing in the past when Nurarihyon was only 5 years old. At that time, Rikuo was with his father, Nurarihyon, and a mysterious girl who seemed close to his father. Suddenly, she stabbed his father in the back, killing him while Rikuo could only look at him in shock. 3 years after the death of Nurarihyon, who is Nura clan's second commander, Rikuo's grandfather, Nurarihyon, decides to make Rikuo a candidate for the third commander who will take his father's place. However, he rejects the decision because, at school, his schoolmates say that the yokai always do evil. They also often hear the evil deeds that the clan leader named Gagoze does, which is kidnaps and devoting human children. Gagoze thinks he is the strongest in Nura clan because he has killed many humans. He then tells Nurarihyon that he is more suitable as a candidate for the third commander of Nura clan. The following day, Rikuo misses the last bus from school and is returned home by Karasu Tengu. Once home, he hears that the bus carrying his classmates has been in an accident. Rikuo transforms into his yokai form for the first time and goes out to rescue them, leading his own night parade of 100 demons. The accident is revealed to have been caused by the Gagoze clan that feeds on children and whose leader is expected to be named the next heir of the Nura clan. Gagoze apparently intends to kill Rikuo because he thinks that Rikuo is not worthy of being the third commander of the Nura clan. But instead, it was he who got killed by Rikuo. So, after he kills Gagoze and the other yokai, he declares that he will become the third heir of the Nura clan and protect humans. Back to the present, Aotabo and Kurotabo, who were on patrol, were surprised by the appearance of two yokai who claimed to be them to get some benefits. Soon afterward, they immediately chased the two yokai away. Not long after, the imposter yokai accidentally crossed paths with two mysterious young men named Ryuji and Mamoru, who turned out to be Onmyoji. Knowing that they were Onmyoji, Aotabo confronted them and engaged in a fierce battle with them. However, they managed to take him down in the end. On the other hand, Rikuo and his classmates decide to search for Yura, who has not been attending school recently. The next day, Rikuo finds Yura training alone in an abandoned building. Yura seems still in shock about what happened before because she couldn't protect her friends from yokai attacks and was instead protected by a mysterious yokai. In the middle of their conversation, Ryuji suddenly appears and immediately knows that Rikuo is a yokai, even though he is in his day form. Ryuji told Yura to stay away from Rikuo and then attacked him. However, she instead tried to protect him from Ryuji's attack because she thought that Rikuo was a human all this time. Ryuji was annoyed that Yura protected the yokai, their enemies. Because of that, he didn't hesitate to attack her until she finally lay helpless. Seeing Yura trying desperately to protect him until she was seriously injured, Rikuo finally showed his yokai form, along with the day that had turned into night, and saved her from the fatal attack by Ryuji. The battle between them begins. Ryuji uses his ultimate weapon and challenges Rikuo. If he can survive for 3 minutes, he wins. Finally, Rikuo manages to survive but is severely injured. Knowing that Rikuo was helpless, Ryuji then launched a fatal attack. Unexpectedly, Rikuo had anticipated the attack and managed to dodge it. In fact, he counterattacked by drawing his sword at Ryuji. Suddenly, Mamoru shows up and attacks Rikuo to protect Ryuji, but his yokai comrades appear to protect their master. Seeing that, Yura thought that Rikuo had killed her brother. Surprisingly, Ryuji gets up, and he isn't wounded. He realizes that Rikuo uses a sword named Nenakiramaru that only cuts a yokai. He knows that he and Mamoru won't be able to defeat Rikuo's yokai comrades, so they decide to leave. But before leaving, Ryuji told the news of their brothers' deaths and about Hagoromo Kitsune, who had resurrected. He said that Hagoromo Kitsune and her men had managed to destroy the barrier installed by the ancestors of the Keikain family and ordered Yura to return to Kyoto on the orders of their grandfather, who is the current head of the Keikain family. After the battle, Yura asks Rikuo whether he is human or yokai. He simply replies that he is a human by day and a yokai by night. However, he is still the same Nurarihyon. So, 400 years ago, the Nura clan started becoming the most feared clan in the land. They are different from the other yokai clans because they do not bother to kill humans. During this era, a beautiful woman named Yohime is said to be God's gift because of her ability to cure any illness and injury. However, Yohime's power is abused by her father, who demands huge amounts of money from the people who want to be cured. Not only that, but her father controls her movements and keeps her isolated at home, unaware of the outside world. As the news of her beauty and special healing powers spreads, she becomes the target of the Kyoto yokai, who wants to offer her heart to their leader, Hagoromo Kitsune. Meanwhile, Nurarihyon has also heard about Yohime and becomes interested in her. To protect Yohime, her father hires the Onmyoji from the Keikain family, led by Koremitsu Keikain, who gives her a sword named Nenakiramaru that could slash at any yokai who tries to attack her. One evening, Nurarihyon appears in Yohime's room and declares his interest in her. The next day, he appears again in her room, taking her to the Nura clan hideout to introduce her to his comrades. And suddenly, Nurarihyon asks her to be his wife. However, she didn't answer and told him not to visit her again. The following night, Yohime's mansion is attacked by yokai, and all of the Onmyoji looking after her are killed. When Nurarihyon arrives there, one of the Onmyoji reveals that Yohime has been captured by Hagoromo Kitsune's clan. After hearing that, he rushes to Osaka Castle to save her. Arrived at that place, Nurarihyon and his yokai comrades challenge Hagoromo Kitsune and her clan. Suddenly, a fierce battle ensued between the two yokai clans until he managed to defeat Hagoromo Kitsune with Nenakiramaru's sword and the help of Hidemoto Keikain, the 13th head of the Keikain family, who seals the fox yokai with his Hagun technique. Soon afterward, Nurarihyon becomes the Lord of Pandemonium, and his clan is acknowledged as the most powerful yokai clan of all. At the same time, Yohime realizes she is in love with him and decides to stay by his side as his wife. Back to the present, Rikuo, who remembers a little about Hagoromo Kitsune and painful memories of the death of his beloved father, decides to go to Kyoto and save Yura. Hearing Rikuo's wish, his grandfather strictly forbids it because, with his current strength, he will not be able to face Hagoromo Kitsune and her henchmen. As Rikuo insists, Nurarihyon has no choice but to send his grandson to Tono village to train him and improve his skills as his current abilities are lacking to defeat Hagoromo Kitsune. At first, Rikuo tried to escape from Tono village because he was instead told to do household chores such as washing clothes and chopping firewood. However, he was completely unable to escape from the village. Not only that, in Tono village, he also doesn't change into his human form, even during the day. Rikuo meets Idaku, a male yokai who tells him that Tono village is a hidden village also called the Sacred Grounds of Ayakashi or Yokai. It is so full of smoke that the only places reached by sunlight are those full of spirit energy. The entire village can be considered a yokai, as those unable to sever the fear surrounding it will never be able to leave. Rikuo also wondered about the fear. He then met Idaku, who was a yokai assigned to train him while he was in Tono village. After practicing for a while, Rikuo seems to have mastered the fear of Nurarihyon's trademark to hide his existence, like the one he used to defeat Tamazuki. But the technique turned out to be easily broken by Idaku, who can form his fear into a weapon that can destroy the fear of his opponent. Not only Idaku but Rikuo also met several yokai from Tono village. One of them was Amezo, who was a kappa, one of yokai, Rera, who was a yuki-onna, and also Yukari, who was a zashiki warashi. In addition, there is also Dohiko the Fudachi and Awashima, a yokai male during the day and female during the night. Awashima hates being looked down on or underestimated because of his female form, as he considers himself male. In the following days, Rikuo's training continues. At the same time, a deputation of Kyoto yokai named Kidomaru came to Tono village to ask Akagapa, the village leader, to help Hagoromo Kitsune fulfill her goal. However, he refuses to help them. On the other hand, the Kyoto yokai are preparing to leave the village when they spot Rikuo and attempt to kill him. During the fight, Rikuo understands the real power of Nurarihyon's fear and manages to cut the fear of his enemy. Kidomaru and his henchmen retreat, saying they will defeat him with his clan and all onmyoji from the Keikain family. Meanwhile, Hagoromo Kitsune, currently using the human form of a young black-haired girl with very pale skin, is seen getting ready to destroy the fifth protective seal in Seiji Temple along with her men. One of her yokai comrades, a male yokai named Ibaraki Doji, suggested that they destroy the protective seals at once, as it would be a waste of time to destroy them one by one. The other yokai seemed to agree with Ibaraki Doji's suggestion, as they couldn't wait to see the destruction of Kyoto and humanity after 400 years of waiting. However, Hagoromo Kitsune's advisor, Minagoro Shijizo, said that they could not destroy the seal at once because it was created by Hidemoto Keikain, the 13th head of the Keikain family, who sealed her 400 years ago. Hidemoto is the most talented onmyoji in the history of the Keikain family and possesses abilities that cannot be underestimated. The Fox yokai firmly believed that they were able to destroy all the seals, and after that, they would set up a base at Nijo Palace. At the same time, Ryuji, who knows that Hagoromo Kitsune and her henchmen have managed to break the seal and spread terror in Kyoto, orders Yura to finish training before the Fox yokai destroys all the seals and takes control of Kyoto City. Elsewhere, the head of the Keikain family is meeting with the higher-ups of Keikain House to discuss the movement of Hagoromo Kitsune and her henchmen. They managed to destroy 6 seals in 13 days. Pado and Masatsugu Keikain, talented onmyoji assigned to protect the seal, suggest they face Hagoromo Kitsune head-on. However, the higher-ups rejected the suggestion because they didn't want to lose more candidates to lead the Keikain House. One of the most talented onmyoji in Keikain House, Akifusa, then says that he has a plan to defeat Hagoromo Kitsune and rushes off to Rokukinji with Pado and Masatsugu. Long story short, Akifusa succeeded in confining Hagoromo Kitsune inside the barrier he had created and separated her from her comrades. After that, Pado attacked her with his strongest shikigami but was easily blocked by her. Not long after, Gasha Dokuro, a giant skeleton yokai who was a subordinate of Hagoromo Kitsune, managed to destroy the barrier so that the yokai managed to break in and launch attacks on the onmyoji. At the same time, Rikuo, still training with Idaku in Tono village, hears about many skilled onmyoji being hunted down one by Hagoromo Kitsune and her yokai comrades. He decides to return home to gather his night parade of demons before heading to Kyoto. His friends among the Tono yokai decide to accompany him. Arriving home, Rikuo then asked his night parade of demons to get ready because they were going to Kyoto soon. Nurarihyon, knowing that his grandson had made up his mind to go to Kyoto, then summoned Takarabune, a giant yokai in the form of a flying ship that would take Rikuo and his comrades to Kyoto. Meanwhile, in Kyoto, Kana and her classmates, who are members of the Kiyojuji Paranormal Club, go on a yokai search expedition at a temple at night. Due to the influence of Hagoromo Kitsune, the yokai around them did not hesitate to appear, even attacking Kana and her classmates. Luckily, Yura arrived on time and immediately helped Kana. At the same time, a yuki-onna named Surara and Aotabo also arrived to protect them on Rikuo's orders. Realizing that the situation in Kyoto is getting more dangerous with the appearance of the yokai who openly attack humans, Yura brings her classmates to the main house of the Keikain family and tells them about the dire situation that is currently happening in Kyoto. Yura then asked her classmates to stay at home for their safety, and Surara and Aotabo were assigned to protect them. Shortly afterward, Yura rushed to the Sokokuji Temple, the second seal's location, because Hagoromo Kitsune and her comrades were expected to destroy the seal that very night. Arriving there, the onmyoji had activated the barrier to protect the seal. At first, the Kyoto yokai struggled to break the barrier. But then, there appeared someone who could destroy the Onmyoji's barrier with a single slash of his spirit sword, and that person was none other than Akifusa, who was under the influence of the yokai. Akifusa, who harbors jealousy towards Yura because she is the heir of the Keikain family, has been possessed by Minagoro Shijizo to attack the Onmyoji, who are his comrades. Seeing the Onmyoji starting to get pressed by the attacks from Akifusa and the yokai, Yura immediately intervened and mobilized her 4 strongest Shikigami to face the Kyoto yokai. However, that caused Yura to be caught off guard, so she couldn't predict Akifusa's attack. At the same time, Ryuji arrived just in time and managed to stop the attack. He then orders her to meet Mamoru and find the mastermind behind all this while he fights against Akifusa. Long story short, Ryuji finally managed to defeat Akifusa. Suddenly, Hagoromo Kitsune and her night parade of demons appeared and managed to take Ryuji down. Not long after, Yura finally arrived with Mamoru and then used Hagun's Shikigami technique, the high-level technique Hidemoto Keikain had used to seal her 400 years ago. Turned out that only a talented Onmyoji can use the technique, and anyone who manages to use it is entitled to become the head of the Keikain family. Hagun is a technique that summons the Keikain house's previous ancestors as a massive Shikigami. Although the technique is considered a Shikigami, it cannot attack independently. But with the direction of the 13th head of the Keikain family, Hidemoto Keikain, Yura finally manages to purge the possessed Akifusa. He appears before Yura and Hagoromo Kitsune, who immediately recognize her as his old enemy. Generally, in the Hagun technique, the ancestors appear as skeletons in priest robes, but the 13th head, Hidemoto, appears, attributing to his immense spiritual power. Knowing that the Onmyoji would not be able to defeat Hagoromo Kitsune and her comrades, Hidemoto then asked Yura and the Onmyoji to retreat and devise a new strategy. Meanwhile, there was a conflict between Kubinashi and Idaku, which led to a fight between them. The battle grew fiercer before Zen finally arrived to break them up. At the same time, the Nura clan's flying ship entered the Kyoto area. It is intercepted by a group of Kyoto Sky Guards yokai led by a yokai named Hakuzozu, who then challenges Rikuo to a one-on-one duel. He accepted the challenge and managed to defeat Hakuzozu with his new technique. The defeated Hakuzozu asks for death, but Rikuo spares and asks him to join his side. In the meantime, although their leader was defeated, the yokai army begins to attack the Nura clan's flying ship as it nears the dark outskirts of Kyoto. Rikuo and his clan are trying to survive the attack and finally land their damaged ship on a river in downtown Kyoto. After that, Hakuzozu said that he refused to join them. However, he advises Rikuo to go to the Fushime Inari Shrine, the location of the 8th seal. Meanwhile, Yura and the Onmyoji gathered at the Keikain family's main house to discuss the next steps. As a legendary Onmyoji during his lifetime, Hidemoto, now a Shikigami, reveals his plan to defeat Hagoromo Kitsune and her yokai comrades. He suggested that they let the fox yokai occupy Nijo Palace because she would give birth to her child in the palace. Although Hidemoto doesn't know exactly what kind of creature will be born by Hagoromo Kitsune, he is sure that this creature will bring disaster to all mankind. He said they had a chance to defeat her after she entered the Nijo Palace and awaited the birth of her child. He informs them they need 2 things to defeat Hagoromo Kitsune: Hagun's Shikigami technique and Nenakiramaru's spirit sword that can kill yokai. Hidemoto also ordered the Onmyoji to protect Yura because currently, she is the only Onmyoji who can use Hagun's Shikigami technique. Ryuji then told him and the others that Nenakiramaru's sword was currently in the hands of Nurarihyon's grandson. Upon hearing that, Tsurara bursts into the meeting to inform them that Nura clan's aid is on its way. But before Tsurara revealed her true identity as a yokai from the Nura clan, Yura rushed to invite her to leave the meeting, along with Hidemoto. Tsurara said that currently, Rikuo was training somewhere to increase his strength before facing Hagoromo Kitsune. Hidemoto, who heard this, seemed a little relieved and revealed to Yura and Tsurara that the one who defeated Hagoromo Kitsune 400 years ago was Nurarihyon, who wielded Nenakiramaru's sword now. Tsurara asserts that Rikuo is a yokai who will not allow any yokai to harm humans because he is also a human. However, his human blood is often underestimated and considered a weakness. He fights for his principle to always protect humans from the threats of the yokai. On the other hand, unbeknownst to Yura and the others, Ryuji was eavesdropping on their conversation from behind the door. At the same time, Rikuo and his comrades finally arrived at the Fushime Inari Shrine with many gates called Torii. Even though they came during the day, Rikuo didn't change to his human form because of the dark aura that enveloped Kyoto since Hagoromo Kitsune's invasion and her night parade of demons. In fact, Kyoto is now filled with black spirit pillars that can spread hatred, which is the main strength of Kyoto yokai. Not only did Rikuo remain in his yokai form, but Awashima also did not return to his male form and remained a female yokai. While Rikuo and his comrades were discussing, Awashima approached an altar called Omoikarishi and lifted a boulder. No one knew about his actions except for Kurotabo. After Awashima put the stone in its place and joined his team, Kurotabo approached the altar and seemed to know something about Omoikarishi. On the way, Amezo told Awashima about the curse on Omoikarishi, in which calamity would befall a person if the Omoikarishi stone lifted by that person was heavier than expected. Not long after, Awashima saw a boy crying alone on one of the branches. Surprisingly, only he could see the boy. After that, he intends to help the boy. However, because of that, he is separated from Rikuo and the others. He then must confront Mukade, the yokai who inhabits the area, and he becomes desperate because the yokai turned out to be so formidable. Amid his despair, Kurotabo emerges from one of the torii and helps Awashima free himself from Mukade's restraints. Kurotabo tells him that Mukade will only get stronger if he feels scared and down. Therefore, Awashima must overcome his fear to be free from the illusory world created by Mukade to trap his victims. After a fierce battle, he finally managed to defeat Mukade and was reunited with Rikuo and the others. Shortly afterward, Hidemoto arrived at Fushimi Inari with Ryuji and Mamoru, who then dropped Mukade, who was still alive and was about to attack them. After that, Ryuji then sealed Mukade and made it a seal to replace the protective seal that had been destroyed by Hagoromo Kitsune and his henchmen. When the seal was in place, one of Kyoto's spirit pillars finally disappeared, and the sky brightened. After Hidemoto introduced himself, Rikuo was reminded of his grandfather's message before going to Kyoto, where Nurarihyon asked him to make Hidemoto his ally to defeat Hagoromo Kitsune. Hidemoto is a legendary onmyoji who has created a spiral seal, the strongest seal made by connecting certain paths to protect Kyoto from the yokai. To destroy it, the yokai must destroy the seal one by one. Hidemoto explained that in each of these seals, he also sealed the strongest yokai and made them into his own seal, just like what Ryuji had just done. He plans to rebuild the seals that have been destroyed and asks Rikuo and his comrades to help the onmyoji repair the seals because then they can stop the flow of spirit energy needed by Hagoromo Kitsune to give birth to her child. He also told Rikuo how to defeat her as he did with Nurarihyon 400 years ago. In the middle of their conversation, suddenly, one of the strongest giant yokai, Tsuchigumo, appeared and immediately destroyed the place. Rikuo and the others managed to survive his sudden attack, then rose to fight against the giant yokai. On the other hand, Hidemoto warned Yura and the onmyoji not to fight Tsuchigumo and told them to avoid the giant yokai as far as possible because they wouldn't be able to defeat him. One thing is for sure, Tsuchigumo is not an ally of Hagoromo Kitsune because he only seeks a good fight and a strong opponent, regardless of race, size, or gender. Finding a worthy adversary drives him into a frenzy, and those who can best him in battle, or even significantly wound him, would earn his respect. Rikuo tries to fight Tsuchigumo using a new technique he has mastered, but that attack didn't work against the giant yokai, who had enormous physical strength and could even easily knock him down without effort. Yura then asked Hidemoto how to defeat Tsuchigumo because Hidemoto had sealed him. However, Hidemoto reveals that he has never defeated the giant yokai. 400 years ago, after the defeat of Hagoromo Kitsune, all the yokai had left Kyoto, except for Tsuchigumo, who had been raging in the city for more than a month. When Tsuchigumo was exhausted, Hidemoto tricked him by making the giant yokai sleep long and sealed him. On the other hand, Rikuo's comrades didn't stay silent after seeing their commander taken down like that. They immediately attacked simultaneously, but their attacks couldn't even scratch Tsuchigumo in the slightest, and instead, they were beaten to a pulp by the giant yokai. Rikuo and his night parade cannot defeat him, no matter how many times they try. However, Rikuo continues to fight, even though the morning has come and he is in his human form. Impressed by their tenacity, Tsuchigumo retreats to Sokokuji Temple, taking Tsurara as a hostage to ensure that Rikuo and his night parade will come after him to save her. At the same time, Hagoromo Kitsune and her comrades finally destroyed the first seal and occupied Nijo Palace as they had planned. After that, she headed to the pond under the palace and planned to give birth to her child in the pond. She then ordered Ibaraki Doji and Shokeira to collect the human hearts, which she later used as food to increase her strength, and also Nue, her child who would soon be born. The scene then switches and shows flashes of Rikuo's memory on the day of his father's death, who tried to protect him from the attack of a mysterious girl who wanted to kill him. The flash of memory then changes and shows Rikuo realizing that he can't beat Tsuchigumo in battle. Rikuo then woke up and found himself somewhere with Gyuki, who suddenly attacked him with the fear while explaining the importance of being stronger than Nurarihyon and himself to defeat his enemies and become the commander of the night parade. In Kyoto, Hidemoto tries to convince Rikuo's yokai comrades to carry out their plan to build the seal because Hagoromo Kitsune has destroyed the first seal and occupied Nijo Palace to give birth to Nue. But most of the yokai had not fully recovered after receiving the attack from Tsuchigumo, so Kejiro tried to raise the fighting spirit of the yokai to help the Onmyoji and asked Kubinashi to lead them. Suddenly, Kejiro realized that Kubinashi had disappeared somewhere. Kubinashi, disappointed after their crushing defeat in the fight against Tsuchigumo, seemed to wander the streets of Kyoto aimlessly. On the way, he ran into yokai, who were about to attack humans. Since he was in a bad mood and his mind was also in turmoil, he returned to his old murderous ways and slaughtered the yokai. Kejiro, who managed to catch up to him, seemed surprised to see the drastic change in Kubinashi, who returned to his old self, a cold-blooded sadistic killer. He asks Kubinashi to come back with him, but Kubinashi becomes determined to single-handedly take down the Kyoto yokai and, ultimately, Hagoromo Kitsune herself. Meanwhile, Rikuo is being trained by Gyuki and the Great Tengu of Mount Kurama to increase the power of his fear so that Rikuo can lead his night parade. Gyuki explained that being the commander of the night parade of demons is not just to lead them in battle because the strength of the night parade is directly proportional to the strength of their commander. In other words, the stronger the commander, the stronger the night parade. Furthermore, if the commander can make a strong bond by gaining the trust of his comrades, then his strength will become even greater. Since Hagoromo Kitsune will become stronger each time she is reincarnated, Rikuo must also have the strength to surpass his grandfather and father to defeat her. Gyuki asks Rikuo to stop thinking that his human side is a weakness and tells him that the peak of the Nura clan's glory was when his father, who was a half yokai and half human, became the commander of the Nura clan. At that time, Nurarihyon could accept his human and yokai sides, which made him so strong and respected by his opponents. Kubinashi, filled with the desire to kill, then went to the location of some of the seals that had been destroyed and slaughtered the Kyoto yokai who were guarding the place until finally arriving at Ryuenji Temple, where he massacred the yokai who kidnapped school students. Kejiro, who saw that, remembered Kubinashi in the past, who did not hesitate to kill, even though he had no reason to do so. At the same time, Ibaraki Doji arrived and was very upset to learn that all his men had been massacred by Kubinashi. Elsewhere, Shokeira and his yokai comrades broke through the barrier around the Keikain family's main house and prepared to launch an attack on them. Seeing this, the head of the Keikain family did not let that happen and ordered the Onmyoji to rebuild the barrier to defend their residence. However, the Onmyoji were no match for Shokeira, who could easily tear down their defenses and destroy the place. In fact, Shokeira also managed to injure the head of the Keikain family very fatally. Seeing that their leader had been defeated, Akifusa, who had just recovered from his injuries, was determined to use his forbidden technique against Shokeira, even when he realized his chances of winning were slim. When Akifusa got into a fierce battle against Shokeira, and the yokai tried to break into the main house, Aotabo, who was in charge of protecting Kana and the others, then put them to sleep and joined the battle against the Kyoto yokai with the Onmyoji. At the same time, Kubinashi and Kejiro engage in a fierce battle against Ibaraki Doji and his yokai comrades. The collaboration between the two made Kubinashi remember the past when he first met Nurarihyon and decided to join the Nura clan and be part of his night parade. In the middle of the fight, they were surprised by the appearance of Kidomaru, who arrived at the place to check the situation because Ibaraki Doji had not yet deposited the human hearts requested by Hagoromo Kitsune. Kubinashi and Kejiro became increasingly pressured by Kidomaru's presence, especially after he managed to take down Kejiro by stabbing the female yokai. When Ibaraki Doji was about to kill Kubinashi, a seal fell from the sky and stuck right in the middle of the shrine grounds. Yura and Hidemoto then showed themselves in front of the Kyoto yokai while telling them that the seal could only be broken by Hagoromo Kitsune. The Onmyoji, assisted by Rikuo's yokai comrades, reassembled the three seals that had been destroyed to reduce the flow of spirit energy to her. Hearing this, Kidomaru became furious and prepared to attack Yura, who tried to fight the Kyoto yokai using his flagship technique. However, she immediately became desperate because he was not a weak opponent. But then, Ryuji and Mamoru arrived there and instantly saved her. At the same time, Kappa appeared and opened a portal to a safer place and took Kubinashi and Kejiro away from the battle because they had been seriously injured. Seeing this, Ryuji immediately threw Yura to go with Kappa to protect her from Kidomaru, who was after her heart to present to Hagoromo Kitsune. Meanwhile, Kurotabo and Ryuji and Mamoru chose to flee Kidomaru and Ibaraki Doji, as their focus right now was to reassemble the seal that had been broken. At Mount Kurama, Rikuo, who had to undergo combat training with Gyuki and the Great Tengu, suffered a crushing defeat and was badly injured. Zen, who accompanied Rikuo, then treated him and seemed impressed by his physical toughness, who was still able to get up and fight against Gyuki and the Great Tengu, despite being beaten badly by Tsuchigumo. In the middle of their conversation, Zen showed his beautiful but poisonous wings and said that those wings were his fear. He says he wants to spread his wings and become a strength for Rikuo in every battle they face. Hearing that, Rikuo became excited again, determined to become stronger to protect his comrades. When the sun rose, he rushed to meet Gyuki. They immediately started training because Rikuo didn't have much time to defeat Hagoromo Kitsune, who was about to give birth to Nue. In the evening, after training, Rikuo, who was having dinner with Zen, Gozumaru, and Mezumaru, was then surprised by an attack from Kurama Tengu, who were subordinates of the Great Tengu of Mount Kurama. Zen assumed that their attacks were part of the training Gyuki had prepared, but Kurama Tengu seemed very serious about killing them all there, especially after Kurama Tengu did not hesitate to hurt Gozumaru, who was Gyuki's subordinate. Rikuo then asked them to flee immediately while he would withstand the attacks. However, Zen refuses to leave and insists on staying by his side to help him in the battle. Unexpectedly, Rikuo could activate a new technique by combining his and Zen's fears and managed to fend off the attacks from Kurama Tengu, even knocking them all out. The Great Tengu of Mount Kurama witnessed his most powerful men being defeated so easily, then wondered about the training Gyuki taught Rikuo. At first, the Great Tengu was willing to help Gyuki train Rikuo to defeat Hagoromo Kitsune. However, due to the imminent birth of Nue, he finally decided to send his men to snatch Nenikiramaru's sword from Rikuo's hands. Gyuki then tells Rikuo that the technique is a technique that he must master to become the commander of the night parade, because the real power of being a leader is not about protecting or being protected by someone, but about trusting someone and gaining the trust of that person. And by doing so, they will voluntarily lend the power they have, which in turn can increase the power of the commander of the night parade. Elsewhere, Nura, who had just arrived at the main house of the Keikain family, looked very surprised to learn that the yokai had attacked the house and seriously injured her grandfather. At the end of his life, he conveyed his last message to Nura, asking her to become stronger because he would become the head of the Keikain family and protect Kyoto in the future. Nura was so shocked and devastated by her grandfather's death that she fell asleep. Hidemoto then asked Akifusa to take care of everything and treat all the injured, including the yokai from the Nura clan, because they had helped in the fight against Hagoromo Kitsune's yokai comrades. On the other hand, Aotabo, who knew they had been beaten badly by Tsuchigumo, looked very angry and intended to take revenge. Seeing this, Kubinashi stopped him and advised him not to act rashly because they would not be able to defeat Tsuchigumo or Hagoromo Kitsune without proper preparation. Moreover, Rikuo was also not with them. In the despair Rikuo's yokai comrades experienced, they finally got a glimmer of hope when he came with Zen. They seemed confident after undergoing a brief training with Gyuki at Mount Kurama. Knowing their commander had returned, the fighting spirit within them rekindled and was determined to help Rikuo face all his opponents on the battlefield. Meanwhile, Minagoro Shijizo received a report from his yokai comrades that the Kyoto yokai had been defeated in several places by a very powerful yokai army. Jizo immediately found out that the attack was carried out by the Nura clan, who were trying to thwart Hagoromo Kitsune, who was about to give birth to her child. After successfully defeating the Kyoto yokai and helping the Onmyoji to put the protective seal back in place, Rikuo rushed to where Tsuchigumo was to save Tsurara. Rikuo and his night parade arrived at the shrine just before Tsurara was about to stab her in the neck because she was feeling disappointed in her weak self, who couldn't protect Rikuo. However, he told Tsurara she no longer needed to protect him and asked her to lend her power and entrust it to him. At first, Tsurara didn't understand what Rikuo wanted, but after he mentioned borrowing her fear, she finally understood and, without hesitation, lent her fear to him to fight Tsuchigumo. The technique is called Matori and is used by Rikuo's father, who has both yokai and human blood. Matori is a technique for wearing the fear of others, and it can only be used with people who Rikuo trusts and trusts him. In other words, combining their power can increase his power. Using Tsuchigumo's fear, Rikuo could finally slash one of Tsuchigumo's arms, whereas before, he could not scratch the giant yokai's skin. However, even though his arm was cut off and unable to grow again, Tsuchigumo was actually overjoyed to have finally found a match for him after waiting hundreds of years. He was so happy and became too excited to destroy the place to build his own battle arena and face Rikuo in earnest. Tsuchigumo intends to separate Rikuo from his comrades, but Rikuo had performed the Matori technique with his comrades, so they would always be by his side. The same goes for Zen and Tsurara. Not long after, Idaku, Awashima, and Amezo appear behind Rikuo and say that they are willing to lend their fear to Rikuo to defeat Tsuchigumo, even though they are not part of his night parade. After convincing Idaku, Rikuo finally managed to perform the Matori technique with Idaku and used his fear to sharpen his attack. Together, they were finally able to split Tsuchigumo's body and make the giant yokai kneel before him. Having been defeated, Tsuchigumo decides to gather his strength again to fight against the Nue, who will soon be born into the world. Even so, Rikuo did not give up and tried to defeat Hagoromo Kitsune. On the other hand, as the battle between her and Rikuo grew fiercer, fragments of memories of Nurarihyon kept popping up in her mind and made her somewhat lose her focus in the fight. Yura then took the opportunity to attack Hagoromo Kitsune, assisted by Ryuji and Mamoru. At the same time, the Nue finally rose, and its shell started to crack. As the cracked fragments began to fall, Hagoromo Kitsune seemed so happy that her beloved son would finally rise, and they would reunite like 1,000 years ago. Hagoromo Kitsune then said that the fragments were memories of her, who had reincarnated many times over the past 1,000 years to bring Nue into this world. However, they all suddenly became stunned when they saw one of the fragments of her memory that showed the past of Rikuo and Nuraryhon's death several years ago. After seeing the fragments of the memory of Nurarihyon, Hagoromo Kitsune suddenly felt an intense pain in her head, as if the memory had made a very deep impression and was also very painful for her. Realizing that she was caught off guard, Yura didn't waste the opportunity to use Hagun's Shikigami technique and launch a full attack on her. At the same time, Rikuo grabbed Ninokiramaru's sword and stabbed her to avenge his father's death. On the other hand, Hagoromo Kitsune, who saw the fragments of memories about Nurarihyon, suddenly remembered everything and called him Daddy. After that, the human body possessed by her lost consciousness, along with her, who finally came out of the body. Hagoromo Kitsune looked very angry because she didn't think that she had been defeated, even though, according to her, the human body she used this time was perfect. With a series of memories about Nurarihyon and the human girl being the vessel for her resurrection this time, she finally realized that Seimei was the mastermind behind all this, and Jizo was his henchman. At the crucial moment, Nue was finally reborn in a different form from his previous life as Abe no Seimei. Nue admits that he was the one who sent the girl from hell to become a vessel for his mother, who would give birth to him again in this world. Seeing her truly reborn son, even in a perfect form, Hagoromo Kitsune didn't mind and hugged her son longingly. However, after reincarnating many times and struggling to bring her son back to this world, Hagoromo Kitsune did not get what she wanted in the end, as Nue instead threw his mother into the hell beneath them. Knowing that he had awakened, Tsuchigumo rushed over and challenged him to a fight. Turned out that Nue could defeat Tsuchigumo effortlessly and throws him into hell. Jizo, who was very happy to welcome the rebirth of his master, then presented the Demon King's hammer sword to Nue, as he had promised. With the spiritual sword, Nue could destroy parts of Kyoto with just one slash, and planned to destroy the entire city, then rebuild it as he wished. Jizo then reveals himself to be part of Sanmoto Gorazaemon, the leader of the Yakumonogatari clan, which was decimated by Rikuo's father and the Nura clan during the Edo era. Knowing that Nue's existence would threaten the safety of mankind, Rikuo did not remain silent and attacked him with Ninokiramaru's sword. Unexpectedly, Nue could easily break the spiritual sword with just one finger. When Nue was about to kill Rikuo, the human girl suddenly appeared in front of them and sacrificed herself to protect Rikuo. After that, Nurarihyon arrived there and rushed to save them. Nurarihyon then asked Gyuki and the other higher-ups of the Nura clan to buy time by fighting Nue while he would confirm the identity of the human girl. Rikuo assumed she was his older sister because he called his father Daddy. But it turns out that the girl is Yamabuki Otome, a female yokai who was Rihon's first wife during the Edo period. As a result of Hagoromo Kitsune's curse on Nurarihyon, Yamabuki and Rihon were unable to have children throughout their 50-year-long marriage. With the Nura clan's board members whispering about her inability to be pregnant, Yamabuki disappeared, leaving behind a note for Rihon which contained a famous Japanese poem lamenting her inability to bear any children for him. She is presumed to have died at some point afterward. 8 years ago, Abe no Seimei and Sanmoto Gorazaemon used her in a plan to take revenge on Rihon. Yamabuki was revived in the form of a child to become Hagoromo Kitsune's host, her memories falsified. She was then sent to Rihon with a subliminal order to kill him upon hearing the poem she had once left him. When he recited it, she stabbed him through the chest with the Demon King's hammer and regained her memories. Despairing over having killed the man she loved, she pulled inward. Then Hagoromo Kitsune was able to take full control of her body. Back to the present time, Yamabuki recounts what happened 8 years prior and then asks to get a better look at Rikuo. She comments that if she had been able to give Rihon a child, she imagines it would be just like Rikuo and then falls unconscious. After learning all the truth about his father's death, Rikuo becomes even more determined to defeat Nue, who looks down on him for having human blood. But then, Nurarihyon emphasized that the human blood that flows in his son and his grandson is not a weakness but a privilege that he is most proud of from them. Rikuo, together with the Nura clan and the Tono Yokai, attack Nue but cannot harm him with their haphazard attacks. Afterward, Rikuo gathers the combined fear of his night parade of 100 demons by using the Madoui technique and attacks Nue. To Nue's surprise, his body starts to fall apart. Realizing that his body still needs to adjust to the human world, he retreats to hell, taking his followers with him but promising to return to finish the fight. Joy fills Rikuo and the allies at their unexpected victory. He then tells his grandfather to make him the third commander of the Nura clan and states that he is willing to undergo any training to become stronger. While Hidemoto and Nurarihyon discuss the issue and estimate that they have about a year before Nue returns, Rikuo asks Akifusa to make a sword stronger than Nenikiramaru. Resting at home, Rikuo dreams of his father and grandfather having fun together. When he wakes up, his mother says he must have had a good dream because he smiled happily while sleeping. Rikuo then joins the council, where Nurarihyon informs everyone that there will be an all-out war against the Nue clan and its retainers. In the end, Rikuo informs his subordinates that the night parade of 100 demons he leads will follow a code of honor and not hurt humans. The anime ends. The moral lesson of this anime is, it's a blessing for us to have friends we can trust, who know the best and worst of us, and who love us despite all our faults. To get someone's trust, you must be trustworthy. Being trustworthy is one of the hallmarks of being a good friend and a good person.